the Oklahoma Sooners drop this series against Kentucky. We're going to talk about that and give our thoughts on this overall series and how it went, and what this means for the Oklahoma Sooners baseball squad going forward. And the SEC softball championship game between Oklahoma and Texas A&M was completely canceled on a Saturday, kind of early in the day on Saturday. We're going to talk about that and give our reactions on all of this here on the Sooner Spotlight. Sooner Nation, welcome into another episode of Sooner Spotlight, your all-access pass for all things Oklahoma Sooners athletics. I'm your host, Josh Mahler. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter. That's at @RealJoshMahler. And you can also follow the show over on Instagram. We are trying to grow that Instagram page, so if you would, just go over there, give us a quick follow. You can start by hitting that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let's get started with that. And, of course, I have to remind you that Sooner Spotlight is a member of the OU Insider content lineup. Go over to OUinsider.com today and get signed up for just everything Oklahoma Sooners. You literally get so much over there with everyone that pitches in over there and contributes to OU Insider. It is absolutely the best way to become a member and to become a member of a community of Oklahoma Sooners fans and keep up to date with all things Oklahoma Sooners athletics. I've been doing a lot of work trying to keep everybody updated with things on the Oklahoma baseball side. Jesse does a really good job with softball as of what's going on right now. And then, of course, between Jesse and Parker and Brandon, they all do a great job keeping everybody up to date with things in the realm of Oklahoma Sooners football, especially during official visit season right now, in a little bit of a slow period, but you get to keep up with recruiting and so much more. It is absolutely the best place to go for all of your Oklahoma Sooners sports news and so much more. Head over to OUinsider.com today, get signed up, and become a member. Stop missing out on the inside scoop. But I wanted to hop on here today to discuss the Oklahoma Sooners' first baseball losing the Kentucky series. This is pretty big for the Oklahoma Sooners, especially as they get closer to the end of the season. We'll also talk about the SEC softball championship game being completely canceled, and I think this is crazy. But we'll start off with Oklahoma Sooners baseball and kind of get into that. First, I do think that this is, a terrible loss for Oklahoma, and it's possibly the worst loss, serious loss of the entire season. Of course, they've had a couple of single game losses that were pretty bad, but this series loss was absolutely, I think, the worst series loss. It's against a team that could have and probably should have been a series. It absolutely should have been a series win. It possibly could have even been a series sweep. And this is against a Kentucky team that's not at their best. They are riddled with injuries throughout their lineup, and with key injuries on top of that. And then on top, it's also a team that just got swept against Mississippi State, who Oklahoma has beaten in a series. This is a Kentucky team that Oklahoma has a chance to beat. Now, with that being said, this is also a Kentucky team that, despite being swept last weekend in Starkville, this is also a Kentucky team that has been hot here towards the latter half of the season. So you can't look at this as an Oklahoma fan and just say that this is a bad Kentucky team. Just remember that this is a Kentucky team, though it's lost many of its members from last season. It's a Kentucky team that was in Omaha and played really well in Omaha a season ago. So this is still a very good Kentucky team. It's a disciplined Kentucky team, regardless of what their record says. And so you do have to take a little bit into consideration when judging how Oklahoma played against Kentucky in this series. And so I will give them the benefit of the doubt, saying that Oklahoma did face a Kentucky team, a good Kentucky team, who is getting hot as the season closes out. And this isn't a Kentucky team that needed this win more than ever, especially after losing and getting swept last weekend against Mississippi State. So this is definitely a situation where Kentucky is playing extremely hard, but it also felt like in Game 2 specifically that Oklahoma just was not playing well at all. It was playing very poorly. You've got a couple of miscues out in the outfield, and then you also have just not being able to connect with the bats, poor pitching. You're giving up free bases. 7 out of the 8 runs for Oklahoma was on giving up free bases between walks and hits. I believe there was double-digit walks. I don't have the stats in front of me right now. And then I think 5 hit by pitches, either 4 or 5 hit by pitches. So just not a good game. Really a bad game in execution from the Oklahoma Sooners, really defensively and specifically in pitching, and a lot of that falls on Cade Crossland. Not all of it, but it does fall on Cade Crossland and his performance on the mound. And I'm not trying to talk down the players because I support these players. I want them to do well, and they know that they've performed bad. It's not like I'm breaking any kind of news to them too. So I'm not trying to talk these players down. I quite frankly want to do the opposite of that. I want to let this be a motivation. Hey, us Sooner fans are behind you guys no matter what. And so, that's really what I'm coming at when I'm talking about bad performances. I want these players to do well just as much as they do. Maybe not quite as much, but almost just as much as they do. And especially as I get closer to the team and as I cover the team, it's a lot more fun to cover this team as they're winning, and it's going to be really fun to cover this team as they get into the regionals. And if they can get to super regionals and then even going forward and making it to Omaha, that would be a dream come true for me to be able to cover my team and to be able to cover them in Omaha. That would be a huge stage for them. But getting back to this series, I feel like this loss, most likely, barring some kind of miracle, and I posted this out on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, I posted this out there that I think barring some kind of miracle, this puts Oklahoma out of the discussion of hosting a regional, which hurts Oklahoma for a few reasons. Now, for one, personally, I don't want Oklahoma to be a number 1 seed going into the regionals just purely for the fact that I don't want them to be the team with the target on their back. It would be nice to come in as a number 2 seed. I saw possibly going to Oregon State. I don't really want that. That's a tough one to go through, and it would be so poetic to see Oklahoma fall. If they were to fall to UConn, I'm not trying to put this out there, but if they were to fall to UConn in baseball, to fall to UConn in men's basketball, women's basketball, and baseball, man, that would absolutely suck. So I don't want that possibility. But for Oklahoma to come in as a 2 seed, I think would be better. And I've been saying this as the season goes on. But for the program itself and for the college, hosting this series, hosting a regional series would be amazing for them, just because they have a chance to bring in some extra revenue, and that's huge, especially if they're able to use that going directly towards OU baseball, which I assume it would. So it definitely takes away their opportunity to host a regional. I think all hopes are basically out the door. I guess there could be some miracle, but all hopes are pretty much out the door, and you won't hear me talking about a chance for hosting a regional anymore unless possibly they sweep Texas, but that's probably not going to happen, especially with this kind of play. But another thing is, with this series loss, I think it puts Oklahoma at jeopardy of losing that number 2 seed in the field of 64. I don't think they will. I think they've still got a very good chance, especially with 4 games left to play. If they could win 2 of those 4 games, I think they're just fine. But it puts them at jeopardy of losing that number 2 seed. Now having to go in as a number 3 seed could put you against some really tough opponents. It could put you in a different regional that Oklahoma doesn't match up well against. So there is some concern there for what could happen if that were to be the case. Hey, Sooner fans, I want to stop you real quick in the middle of this just to entice you to go over to shop.soonerspotlight.com. That's shop.soonerspotlight.com. You can find things like this hat and even this shirt and so much more. I've got baseball gear over there for Oklahoma fans. It's stuff that you can wear as an Oklahoma fan and show off your school colors. That's why I chose the color scheme for this show. And then it also just helps this show so much. We don't have any sponsorships that we're working with yet. We don't really make any money from monetization yet. And we're in the growing phase right now. So that's the best way to help this show is to go over to shop.soonerspotlight.com. The link is down in the description below. Go to shop.soonerspotlight.com. Check out all the merch that we've got over there. I want to add more. There's only a few hats available. I want to add more hats, but of course it takes your guys' support for us to keep on going. I've got a certain goal that I want to reach in merch sales before we go and try to get more hats put on the site. So go over to shop.soonerspotlight.com today. Check out the merch store and support Sooner Spotlight. Let's get back to it. Overall, I don't think this is one for Oklahoma fans to hang their hat on and to look at and say Oklahoma's done for. They have nothing going for them for the rest of the season. That's not the case because, like I said, Kentucky, this is a Kentucky team that is fighting very hard even to just make the field of 64. If they were to have lost this series against Oklahoma or even be swept against Oklahoma, they're quite possibly completely out of the field of 64 if that were to come true. So this was a Kentucky team that had to fight, and like I said, especially since they got swept last weekend against Mississippi State. So I don't think that this is one just to completely hang your hat on. Now for SEC seeding, this does hurt Oklahoma because you're probably seeded a little further down regardless of what happens. I don't think Oklahoma can get out of having to play one extra game, where before they were probably going to have that first round, the first game bye where they didn't have to play the first game. And, so that's one extra game, which makes it one game tougher to keep on going forward. And I also mentioned this in my post on X. I really don't care too much about what their opponent is or who their opponent is or what their road looks like through the SEC tournament because it's going to be tough regardless. I think it's going to be really tough for Oklahoma, for any team in the SEC. It's a complete gauntlet. When you look at how good the SEC is at baseball, it's an extremely difficult tournament to get out of. You hear it all the time. You're hearing it right now, especially as it's getting closer to the SEC tournament time, that there's a debate that it's possibly harder to get out of the SEC tournament. And I would even say the ACC tournament is the same in baseball. It's harder to get out of those conference tournaments and win those conference tournaments than it is to win a national championship in Omaha, to go through Omaha to win a national championship. It's not to say to make it to Omaha. I think to make it to Omaha is probably harder. But to win a conference championship in the SEC is probably a bigger task than to win after making it to Omaha. So just throwing that out there, that this, regardless, it's going to be a tough schedule for Oklahoma to make it through. But the fact that they have to go through one more game makes it even more difficult. And, you really want to make it far. You want to win a game or two in the SEC tournament to really solidify that number 2 seed. Dropping down to a number 3 seed, like I mentioned, I think could really hurt Oklahoma and putting them in a regional that would not be favorable for them. So it's going to be difficult. I think if you're going to be anywhere, you want to be in a Big 12 regional or maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to think of what a better situation would be. I think going to Arizona would be really good if Arizona were to host. I haven't really looked at all the hosting possibilities, but I know that one was thrown in there kind of earlier in the season. I don't think there really is a Big 12 opponent. If there was a Big 10 team hosting, absolutely, that's probably really where you want to go. If there's maybe an Oregon or an Iowa that has a chance of hosting, I don't think Iowa's in the chances of hosting at all. But who knows? Whatever the hosting, whatever the regionals are lined up as, a 3 seed would probably hurt Oklahoma in their matchups more than as going in as a 2 seed, just based on where they've been talked about as a 2 seed going into. So I'm just throwing that out there. I don't know where the possibilities of regionals are right now, but I will definitely dive into that this upcoming week and kind of take a look at it as we get a better understanding of where those regionals are going to be and who Oklahoma would have to go against. So ultimately, I think going forward, you have to look at this Texas game, this Texas series coming up. Oklahoma can't get swept. All right, you have to win against Kentucky in Game 3 on Sunday. And going forward into the Texas series, it's really going to show, for one, it's going to show resilience of this team. It's going to show how much they truly trust each other and how much they're able to bounce back after a loss, and show how ready they really are for this SEC tournament. I think this is going to be empirical to how they perform in the SEC tournament, and going forward from the SEC tournament, how they're going to perform in the postseason play and when whatever regional they get put into, and then going forward into that. So it's going to say a lot about Oklahoma, specifically about this Texas series coming up, and then going after that. Overall, I think you can just put trust in Skip Johnson and this coaching staff, because they are a great coaching staff. Anyone who says otherwise is absolutely ignorant. And I always post with a little picture. I screenshot the definition of ignorance, and I just post that on anyone who says otherwise about for the coaching staff for Oklahoma. It's a great coaching staff. The game plan is always there. It's just not executed, and many times by the players. Most of the time by the players, it's not executed properly. And the players would say the same thing. The coaches would probably take credibility on their end, and as they should. But a lot of the time, when Oklahoma's not performing well, it's from my perspective, it doesn't seem like the coaching staff put out some different game plan. It's just that it's not executed, and so it goes both ways. And I think baseball is one of the few sports where you can blame the players' execution a little more than coaching. With football, I think there's almost everything falls down on coaching. Almost everything. It falls down to coaching and the problems there. Even basketball, a lot of it falls down to coaching. Hockey can absolutely fall down to coaching. But baseball is one of those few sports where sometimes the execution, sometimes it's the pitcher trying to, and Skip talks about this all the time. I think he was talking about it on the broadcast today about how sometimes the pitchers try to go for that punch out. They try to get the strikeout rather than just putting it on the zone. And if they hit it, they hit it. You can't help if the batter is better and just makes a connection with the ball. You really can't help that. All you can help is putting the ball on the mark. Don't try to do anything cute with it. Don't try to put extra spin. Don't think you can grip it a little tighter. Don't try anything other than just putting the ball on the mark. And so there's things like that. Or you didn't take off at the right timing to make it, to steal a base, or maybe even just to make an advance to the next base. There's little things like that. Other things like not being able to get the ball down in the outfield. You can't really help that. Not knowing where the strike zone is and trying to hold up when it looks like a ball, you can't really help that, because the strike zones are just super inconsistent, especially in the SEC. I think the SEC, I've been watching a lot of college baseball. I've been watching much more SEC than anything, just because they've been the top conference in college baseball. But yeah, between SEC, Big Ten, and the ACC, those are the three conferences I've really watched. The SEC is the worst officiating, the worst, strike zone consistencies out of any umps out there. I don't care what you say. But going on to the SEC championship game between Oklahoma and Texas A&M. This was supposed to be a championship game for Texas A&M to prove themselves as a number one seed overall and to move into the postseason as that number one seed. And also to prove that, hey, Oklahoma, you've done a great job in the SEC, but we're better than you. And I think, I see a lot of fans kind of blaming Texas A&M for this, that they paid their way to it. I don't think that's the case. I think Texas A&M wanted to stick it to Oklahoma. I think Texas A&M wanted really badly to say, welcome to the SEC officially to Oklahoma, and Oklahoma wouldn't have had much of a response to that because, hey, you bested us in this game. Good job. You earned it. Instead, they're both crowned. Oklahoma and Texas A&M are crowned co-champions. And jumping over to Oklahoma's side, they wanted nothing more, the players and the fan base, to boast the fact that we won the SEC regular season tournament, or not the tournament, but the regular season champs. That they are the best record in the SEC, and so they've earned that title. And they also wanted to be able to win the title of we played better than everyone else after coming down and breaking, making history and breaking a record for 6 home runs hit, in a single game in an SEC or tournament game, and then also making history as the first ever team in the SEC. In the SEC tournament, teams are 1-81. I believe that was the record put out there. So 1-81 in games where they trail by 5 or more. And Oklahoma is that one now, being the only team to have trailed by 5 runs or more to come back to win that game. And they won it on a 3-run homer to walk off and to win against Arkansas, a very good Arkansas team who is probably going to make it to the College World Series. If I had to take my pick of teams, they would definitely be one team to make it, with as hot as they have been recently. So this is an Oklahoma team that just finds ways to win. And so for Oklahoma, they wanted nothing more than to come out there. And I can just imagine the players and Patty Gasso and especially the fan base. I know from the comments I've seen on social media and on OU Insider message boards and so much more, that, this team wanted nothing more than to prove this conference wrong, to prove the nation wrong. I don't think the SEC really came at this and said, we don't want Oklahoma to win, but it really does feel that way. We don't want Oklahoma to win their first season in because they're just going to brag about it. Yeah, we were. I don't think that's the case, but I do think that Greg Sankey and the SEC making this decision to cancel on a Saturday early afternoon, when you still had another, several hours on Sunday, you could have made the decision maybe by 3:00. If it's still raining and you still have too much rain coming down where you can't finish this game by about 3:00 on Sunday afternoon, how you called it as early as you did on a Saturday afternoon seems very suspect. It seems very questionable, and it's quite possibly, I think, the worst decision I have ever witnessed in SEC history. I mean, that's saying a lot, and I don't know that I would stick by that if I really dove down the history and saw other decisions that the SEC had made in the past. I'm sure they've made other bad decisions, but I always appreciated Greg Sankey, and I always appreciated the SEC, and I was excited about coming to the SEC because of things like this being decided on properly. This was an absolutely pitiful, just absolutely pathetic decision by the SEC, by the conference, by the Southeastern Conference. This has to be explained in its entirety. And if it came out that Oklahoma and Texas A&M both decided and they were the ones that made the decision, then I will let off and I will apologize for my comments, and the SEC is now revered as the best conference again. But right now, and they still are, I'm not going to joke about that. But this is a horrible decision by the SEC, in my opinion. I think possibly one of the worst, possibly one of the worst decisions ever made in the Southeastern Conference history. But I ultimately think that this game had to have been just postponed until you couldn't postpone it anymore, because you've got to give time to where the teams are done and get to see their selection on Sunday. I get that, but that's at 6 p.m. Eastern time. You could have waited until 3 p.m. Eastern time at least to give these teams a chance to play for this title, because co-champions does not feel good. It doesn't feel good as a team. It doesn't feel good as a fan base. I've heard the argument that the conferences and the teams just don't care about conference championships anymore, or the conference tournaments. I think that's BS, and especially in softball. I've never seen in softball where it doesn't matter, because right here, this matters absolutely for Oklahoma to boast the fact that they're number 1 seed. Instead, I think Texas A&M goes in and they're probably boasted up. Not boasted up. They probably hold that number 1 seed now going into the postseason, and we will find out. I think it's 6:00 or 6:30 Eastern time, if memory serves me correctly, when the selection is for the Oklahoma for the softball selection show. So we will have to stay tuned and look forward to that to see where Oklahoma is. Most likely, they still host a regionals and super regionals, and then of course the softball College World Series is the women's College World Series is going to be in Oklahoma City. So they're going to complain about that. But it would have been nice for Oklahoma to have said, "See, we just now won a conference championship in Georgia. We didn't win it in Oklahoma City. We didn't win it with our home turf anymore. You can't argue against us anymore." It would have been nice for Oklahoma, but instead, this decision bars them from holding that up. Hey Sooner fans, did you enjoy this video? Well, go ahead and hit that like button and go ahead and hit that subscribe button. What are you doing if you've made it this far and haven't already? You should be able to find that subscribe button over here. And then if you want to see full episodes, we've got those up here and clips right down here. So go check that out. But we thank you all so much for all the love, all the support. We'll catch you next time. Boomer.